My name is Evelyn Harper, and for the past 35 years, I have been the invisible backbone of a corporate empire. You wouldn't know my face unless you've spent time in the shadowy corners of boardrooms or shuffled through endless stacks of reports while sipping bitter coffee at 3 in the morning. But trust me when I say this, my fingerprints are all over every success story the company ever told itself. I started as an assistant fresh out of college, wide-eyed and eager to make something of myself. Back then, they called it Crestwood Industries. It wasn't much more than a fledgling firm with big dreams, but we had heart, or so I thought. Over the decades, I climbed the ranks, not because I was handed opportunities on silver platters, but because I earned them. Late nights became early mornings. Missed holidays turned into solo dinners by candlelight. My life was Crestwood, and I gave it everything. They said loyalty like mine didn't exist anymore. That's what made the day they fired me sting so deeply. Not just the betrayal, but the audacity of it all. 35 years reduced to a cold email followed by a curt meeting where no one could even meet my eyes. They acted like I was disposable, replaceable, as if those years hadn't mattered at all. But here's the thing about silence. It isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's strategy, and sometimes it's revenge. The first time I walked into Crestwood Industries, I was 22 years old, clutching a leather portfolio that cost more than my monthly rent. The office smelled faintly of printer, toner, and ambition, and everyone moved with purpose, their heels clicking against polished marble floors. I felt small, insignificant, like a single thread in a tapestry too vast to comprehend. But I wanted to belong. I wanted to matter. My boss back then was a man named Gerald Langley. He wasn't warm, exactly, but he saw potential in me. "Evelyn," he'd say, leaning back in his chair with a cigarette dangling from his lips. "You're sharper than half the people sitting in these offices. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Those words stayed with me, even after Gerald retired and new faces took his place. Over the years, Crestwood grew. What began as a modest operation expanded into a multinational powerhouse. We bought companies, launched products, and celebrated milestones. And I was there for all of it, every merger, every scandal, every triumph. While others came and went, I remained constant. A steady hand guiding the ship, ensuring nothing fell apart behind the scenes. By the time I reached my 50s, I held a title most would envy. Senior Vice President of Operations. On paper, it sounded impressive. In reality, it meant I handled everything no one else wanted to deal with, the messes, the crises, the late-night emergencies. If there was a fire, I put it out. If there was a problem, I solved it. And if someone needed to take the fall, well, let's just say I had practiced deflecting blame. Still, I loved my job. Or maybe I convinced myself that I did. Either way, I poured my soul into Crestwood. I sacrificed relationships, hobbies, vacations, all for the sake of keeping the machine running smoothly. And for a long time it felt worth it, until it didn't. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. A shift in tone during meetings. A glance exchanged between executives that lingered too long. Whispers in hallways that stopped abruptly whenever I approached. At first, I dismissed it as paranoia. After all, corporate environments thrive on drama. People love to gossip, to speculate, to invent narratives where none exist. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Then came the layoffs. Dozens of employees, good people who had dedicated years of their lives to Crestwood, were let go without warning. The official explanation was vague. Restructuring, budget cuts, necessary sacrifices for future growth. But I knew better. This wasn't about saving money. It was about control, about consolidating power. And yet I stayed silent, not because I agreed with their decisions, but because I believed my position afforded me some measure of protection. Surely they wouldn't dare touch someone like me, someone who knew too much, who had seen too much, someone who could unravel the entire facade if pushed far enough. How naive I was. The day they fired me, I woke up feeling uneasy. There was no logical reason for it, no ominous dream, no foreboding text message. But the air felt heavier somehow, charged with tension. Still, I dressed in my usual black suit, pinned my pearl earrings into place, and drove to the office as if it were any other Tuesday. When I arrived, the receptionist avoided my gaze. Strange, I thought, but not alarming. By the time I reached my floor, however, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. Doors were closed. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Even the hum of fluorescent lights, seemed louder than usual. I sat at my desk, pretending to review documents while secretly scanning emails for clues. Nothing stood out. No urgent requests, no cryptic messages, just routine correspondence that failed to mask the growing pit in my stomach. At 10 o'clock sharp, my assistant knocked softly on my door. "Evelyn," she said, her voice trembling. "Mr. Alden wants to see you in the conference room." Alden, the CEO, a man I'd known for nearly 2 decades, though known might be too generous a term. We tolerated each other, respected each other's roles within the company, but never crossed the line into friendship. His invitation, or summons rather, was unusual. Typically, our interactions were brief and transactional, confined to scheduled meetings or impromptu hallway chats. Something was definitely wrong. The conference room was eerily quiet when I entered. Alden sat at the head of the table, flanked by members of the executive team. Their expressions ranged from uncomfortable to outright hostile. No pleasantries were exchanged. No explanations offered. Instead, Alden slid a folder across the table toward me. "Evelyn," he began, his tone clipped and formal. "After careful consideration, we've decided to part ways. Effective immediately." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "Excuse me." He refused to meet my eyes. "Your severance package is outlined in the document. We appreciate your contributions to Crestwood, but unfortunately your role is no longer aligned with the company's strategic goals." Strategic goals. The phrase echoed mockingly in my mind. Strategic goals? After 35 years, that was the best they could come up with? I flipped open the folder, scanning the contents with mounting disbelief. The numbers were insulting, a fraction of what I deserved, both legally and morally. Worse still, the termination clause included a non-disclosure agreement that effectively gagged me from speaking publicly about my departure. "You can't be serious," I said finally, looking up at Alden. "This is absurd." His jaw tightened. "It's already been decided." Rage bubbled beneath my skin, hot and searing. For a moment, I considered arguing, demanding answers, tearing apart their flimsy excuses until they crumbled under the weight of their own hypocrisy. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was instinct. Whatever it was, I swallowed my anger and forced a smile. "Fine," I said evenly, standing to leave. "If that's how you want to play it." As I walked out of the conference room, I could feel their eyes boring into my back. Some watched with pity, others with smug satisfaction, but none of them understood. None of them realized that their victory was hollow, their triumph fleeting. Because silence, dear reader, is a double-edged sword, and I intended to wield it with precision. In the weeks that followed, I retreated into solitude. Friends called, offering condolences and advice, but I brushed them off. Family tried to intervene, urging me to fight back, to sue, to expose the injustice. But I shook my head, refusing to explain why patience was paramount, why waiting was essential. You see, I knew things about Crestwood that no one else dared to acknowledge. Secrets buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and denial. Lies whispered in confidence, then forgotten by everyone except me. And now, armed with knowledge and resolve, I plan to use those secrets to dismantle the very foundation upon which Crestwood stood. Not immediately, of course. Revenge requires timing, finesse, and above all, subtlety. So I bided my time, observing from the shadows as Crestwood stumbled blindly forward. Executives scrambled to fill the void I left behind, only to discover how indispensable I truly was. Projects stalled. Deals collapsed. Rumors spread like wildfire, fueled by uncertainty and fear. Meanwhile, I documented everything. Every misstep, every mistake, every unethical decision cloaked in corporate jargon. I compiled evidence, built connections, and laid the groundwork for what would eventually become their downfall. And through it all, I remained silent, letting them believe they'd won, letting them think they were safe. But safety is an illusion in the world of Crestwood Industries. And soon enough, they would learn just how dangerous silence can be. The months dragged on, each day a calculated step in my quiet rebellion. Crestwood Industries carried on as if nothing had changed, but the cracks were beginning to show. Employees whispered about mismanagement and poor decision-making. Clients grew restless as deadlines slipped and promises went unfulfilled. The once stable foundation I had helped build was now crumbling beneath their feet. I watched it all unfold from the sidelines, savoring every moment of chaos. My mornings began with coffee and research, digging through old files, emails, and memos that painted a damning picture of Crestwood's inner workings. By afternoon, I'd reach out to former colleagues under the guise of catching up, subtly planting seeds of doubt or encouraging them to share their frustrations. At night, I meticulously organized my findings into folders labeled by department, executive, and scandal. It was painstaking work, but revenge is rarely quick and never easy. What kept me going wasn't just anger, it was clarity. For years, I had convinced myself that loyalty would be rewarded, that dedication would earn respect. But Crestwood had taught me otherwise. Loyalty meant nothing without power, and silence only served those who feared discovery. Now, I understood the game they played, a ruthless dance of manipulation and self-preservation, and I intended to master it. One name kept surfacing in my investigation: Marcus Alden. Crestwood's golden boy turned CEO, who was the architect of this betrayal. To the outside world, Marcus was a visionary leader, a man who had transformed Crestwood into a global powerhouse. But behind closed doors, he was something else entirely, a puppet master pulling strings, cutting corners, and silencing anyone who stood in his way. Marcus believed himself untouchable, shielded by wealth, influence, and carefully crafted lies. What he didn't realize was that I knew better. Over the years, I had witnessed his rise firsthand. The shady deals brokered in secret meetings, the favors called in at inconvenient times, the skeletons buried deep within the company archives. Every move he made left a trail, and I had been there to see it all. My first strike against him came unexpectedly. One evening, while scrolling through an old email chain, I stumbled upon a thread involving a supplier contract signed 5 years earlier. On the surface, it seemed routine, a standard agreement for office equipment. But buried within the fine print was a clause that allowed Crestwood to bypass labor laws in overseas factories. Worse still, the supplier had since gone bankrupt due to allegations of human rights abuses. This revelation alone wouldn't bring down Marcus, but it was a start. I forwarded the email to a journalist friend named Rachel, someone I trusted implicitly. She had a reputation for exposing corporate corruption and agreed to look into the matter discreetly. Within days, whispers of Crestwood's unethical practices began circulating online. Analysts questioned the company's commitment to ethical sourcing, and shareholders demanded answers. When Marcus called an emergency meeting to address the fallout, I couldn't help but smile. From the comfort of my home, I imagined him pacing the conference room, sweating under the weight of scrutiny. He probably thought it was a minor hiccup, a PR issue that could be smoothed over with press releases and charitable donations. Little did he know, this was just the beginning. As the weeks passed, I continued chipping away at Crestwood's polished facade. Another leak revealed discrepancies in financial reports, hinting at embezzlement among senior executives. A third exposed discriminatory hiring practices that violated federal regulations. Each revelation sent shockwaves through the company, eroding trust and tarnishing its reputation. But perhaps the most satisfying blow came when I uncovered evidence of Marcus's personal misconduct. Hidden in a forgotten server folder was a series of messages between him and a junior employee, a young woman named Clara, who had abruptly resigned 6 months prior. Their exchanges started innocently enough, but soon took a darker turn. Flirtation gave way to coercion, and what followed was unmistakably harassment. Clara hadn't reported the incident, fearing retaliation, but she had confided in me during her final days at Crestwood, unaware that I already suspected the truth. Back then, I had promised her confidentiality, unwilling to risk her career or mine by speaking out. Now, armed with proof, I reached out to her again. "Clara," I said gently over the phone, "I need your permission to use these messages." There was a long pause before she responded. "Why now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because it's time," I replied. "Time for them to pay." After some hesitation, Clara agreed. With her blessing, I sent the evidence to an attorney specializing in employment law. Within hours, news outlets picked up the story, painting Marcus as a predator who abused his power. Public outrage erupted, forcing Crestwood's board of directors to launch an internal investigation. For the first time, Marcus looked vulnerable. His confident demeanor faltered during interviews, his carefully rehearsed answers failing to convince skeptical reporters. Behind the scenes, panic spread among executives as they scrambled to distance themselves from him. Allies became adversaries and loyalties shifted overnight. Yet despite the mounting pressure, Marcus refused to step down. Instead, he doubled down on denial, accusing whistleblowers of fabricating lies to sabotage his legacy. His arrogance was breathtaking and infuriating. Did he really believe he could spin his way out of this? While Crestwood unraveled publicly, I focused on dismantling its private foundations. Using my knowledge of the company's operations, I identified key vulnerabilities that could cripple it further. Supply chains, partnerships, and client relationships. All were fair game. One by one, I contacted individuals who share my grievances, recruiting them to join my cause. Among them was Daniel Harper, no relation, despite the shared surname, a former IT specialist who had been wrongfully terminated after reporting a data breach. Together, we devised a plan to expose Crestwood's cybersecurity flaws, leaking sensitive information to competitors and regulators alike. The resulting investigations paralyzed the company, freezing assets and halting major projects. It was exhilarating, watching everything I had built slowly come undone. Yet, amidst the satisfaction, there were moments of doubt. Was this who I wanted to become? A woman consumed by vengeance, driven by bitterness? The question lingered in the back of my mind, unresolved but impossible to ignore. Still, I pressed on. Revenge wasn't just about punishing those who had wronged me, it was about reclaiming control. About proving that even after 35 years of service, I was more than expendable, more than invisible. And so, as Crestwood teetered on the brink of collapse, I prepared for the final act. An act that would ensure no one ever forgot Evelyn Harper, or underestimated her again. In the end, Crestwood Industries fell like a house of cards. The scandals, lawsuits, and investigations overwhelmed them, leaving the once mighty company in ruins. Marcus Alden resigned in disgrace, his legacy reduced to headlines of corruption and abuse. As for me, Evelyn Harper, I stepped out of the shadows, not as a victim, but as the architect of their undoing. I didn't seek recognition or redemption. I simply wanted justice. And in dismantling Crestwood, I found something unexpected: peace. My silence had indeed been their downfall, but it also gave me my voice back, a voice that whispered, "No one erases Evelyn Harper." The corporate world moved on, but my story lingered, a quiet reminder that loyalty is a two-way street, and revenge, when served cold, can reshape empires.